My name is Parker.
I'm Seid.
And I'm Mike.
And this is the Try Hard podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to another very special episode of the Try Hard podcast. As you guys heard, we have a fourth member joining for today's episode. But before we get into it, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this podcast, the Naperville Acupuncture Center. If you're in the Chicagoland area and are looking to get some dry needling or acupuncture done, I cannot recommend them enough. I've been going to go see Frank and Angela every week for the past couple of months, and they have been key in keeping me healthy and enabling me to elevate my training. As a special offer, if you mention my name or this podcast during your visit, you'll receive a discount on your very first treatment. All right, so now we can get into it. We have Dr. Tommy Martin joining us today to talk about, well, a little bit of everything. I know Mike, Seid, and I are all very excited to chat to him about how he handles being a doctor and a triathlete and marathon runner. But before we get into all that and ask Tommy all of our questions, Tommy, if you just kind of want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about, what you do, how you got started in endurance training and strength training as well, and anything else you want to mention.
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor to be amongst so many incredible athletes. So thank you guys so much. So for the listeners, my name is Tommy Martin. I'm a combined internal medicine and pediatrics physician who is super passionate about health, fitness, and wellness. My background is really in football. I grew up in a small town in Missouri and played football throughout high school and then at a small college. And my goals then were just being as big and strong as possible. And then in medical school, I met this girl who supposedly told me that I told her I'd go on a run with her if she works out with me. And I don't remember saying that. I'd never ran except to the refrigerator. So I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, as it went, we went on a run together, and it ended up being a 10-mile run. And that was by far the farthest I had ever ran, and a stress fracture and not being able to walk for a few weeks in a relationship. Later, I fell in love with endurance sports, and I was terrible at it. And I was like, you know what? I do not want to be bad at this. And so I signed up for my first marathon. And then that was back in 2016. And since then, I've done multiple different fitness feats and adventures and things like that, and have kind of become addicted to the sport. And that's where I found my love for triathlon, endurance sports, and I continue to strength train as well. So that's a little bit in a nutshell on how I got started.
And how did you find triathlon? Because I know marathon is, pretty popular. Everyone knows what a marathon is. But what about like an Ironman? Because I know that isn't as popular or as mainstream as a marathon is.
Yeah, so I ran my first marathon, and then I was like, you know what? I want to continue to get better and more fit, but I want to be able to still spend time with, at my time, my girlfriend, which is now my wife. And so I decided I would train to run a marathon with a 20-pound vest. And then I ran a marathon with a 40-pound vest. And then from there, it led me to residency. And I was like, you know what? I want to challenge myself and do something I'm afraid of. And I also want to show that you could be healthy and fit even in the hardest year of medical training, which is your intern year of residency, where you're working about 80 hours a week. And so I had never swam except for like to stay alive as a kid in the water. And I had never cycled except for just playing around on a bicycle, on the gravel roads in Missouri. And so I signed up for an Ironman, and it was 16 weeks away. And so I decided I'd jump all in. So my first triathlon, my first time swimming in the open water was Ironman Texas back in 2000, what was it, 2018 or 2019, I believe.
Wow. So I was going to ask, so I also was looking at your Instagram, and so you're pretty big into strength training, right? How do you balance training now with strength training? Are you still training for triathlons now? as well?
Yeah, so I just recently had a big feat that I wanted to do, which was following in the footsteps of Fergus Crawley, who did the world's strongest Ironman. And the world's strongest
Right.
Ironman was breaking a 12-hour Ironman and hitting a 1,200-pound powerlifting total all in the same day. So I decided this past year in 2023 that I wanted to try to hit the 1,200-pound powerlifting total, but then to break a 10-hour Ironman all in the same day. And I don't really come from a powerlifting background. I just like to lift for like more like bodybuilding type style of lifting. And so it was definitely out of my comfort zone. And so I trained for 2023 to see what I could do. And I ended up with an 11:30 total and a 9:53 Ironman back in November, all in the same day.
Wow, do you have any plans of going back and trying to get the 1200?
I'm not sure. If I'm honest, I don't like powerlifting. It's just not enjoyable for me. To wait 3 to 5 minutes in between my sets lifting is so monotonous. And so it's really hard for me to want to do that. I mean, I give it a good run. I would say that it's the world's second strongest Ironman, but the fastest,
There we
strongest
go.
Ironman. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And do you kind of want to talk a little bit about how because speaking of, waiting 3 to 5 minutes in between sets, not only is it monotonous for you, but I know that you also have an incredibly busy schedule with your being a doctor. And so maybe if you want to kind of talk about how you balanced your training for that, the world's strongest Ironman, as well as balancing that with your time, because you only have so many hours in the day and you have a family as well. So I know I get often asked, how can I train for an Ironman, with only 10 to 15 hours? And you're doing that, but you're also strength training on top of that. And how did you manage to balance all of those?
Yeah, so I'll say that the first thing is you have to have a very strict schedule. There's no way for one to compete in Ironman without a strict schedule if you have a full-time job and a family. There's also no way to continue to strength train, continue to do Ironman, have a family and work without a very strict schedule. And so I think that's kind of the foundation, and whatever schedule works for you, that's what you'd have to utilize. So for me, from a very young age, I've had the same schedule every single day, which is I wake up at 4 a.m., I go to bed at 9 p.m., get 7 hours of sleep every night. And usually the time from 4 a.m. till like 6:30 a.m. are what I call the golden hours, where majority of the rest of the world is asleep. And so this is where you get 2.5 hours to yourself to do what you need to get done. Right. And that's before the rest of the world wakes up and could kind of, interfere with that time. And so I think utilizing those 2 to 2.5 hours is crucial to success within this strict schedule. And so what I would do is I would lift 4 to 5 days a week, depending on my time. And those were set up for pretty much upper lower split, to where I do upper body strength training and lower body strength training on different days. And I would hit those 2 to 3 times a week. So each upper day, either 2 times per week, and the lower day 3 times per week, or vice versa, 3 uppers and 2 lowers, depending on what my schedule looked like. And then for triathlon training, really it was every single day. Now, truthfully, my swim volume is always very, very low. For one, I don't like it. And two, I just know that swimming is debatable, but it's the smallest portion of the race, and so I don't put as much time into it. And so I really focused on my running and cycling to, try to pull the most of the weight. And then towards getting close to the race, I increased my swimming. And so what that looked like is I would swim 2 to 3 times per week. I would cycle 4 to 5 times per week, and I would run 4 to 5 times per week. And the most I ever got up to in terms of weekly hours was about 20 hours of training throughout the week, and about 4 hours of strength training in my highest week of triathlon.
Wow. On
Yeah.
top of working probably 80 hours. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I will say, so as a hospitalist now, so like back in residency, you work 80 hours a week every single week, no matter what. My schedule
Yeah.
now that I'm done with residency is a lot nicer, to where I work a week, and within that week I work about 80 hours, but then the next week I have completely off. And so I would also kind of stagger the volume of my training based on my weeks on service versus my weeks off of service. So my weeks on service, it'd be like 10 to 15 hours of training. And then my weeks
Yeah.
off of training, I mean, my weeks off of work would be like 15 to 25 hours of training.
Nice.
And now, have you ever or do you, when you are working a lot more when you're on service, are you getting less sleep than when you're not on service? And if so, do you find that there's a big difference in your performance, whether that be in work or in training, when you're getting less sleep or more sleep? Because I know personally, when I was working at Garmin full time, and now granted, I wasn't working as much as you were. I was only working, 30 to 40 hours a week at Garmin. But when I was trying to work full time and train full time, and I was only sleeping 5, 6 hours a night, I just found that my performance it wasn't as good as it was now. I just find I can recover better with more sleep. I'm getting 8 to 9 hours a night. And so have you found any correlation between, sleep hours, if that does change when you are on service versus off service?
Oh, for sure. Sleep is like, in my opinion, sleep is like the superpower to longevity, to fitness, to improvement in strength and endurance sport. And there's a direct correlation from my weeks on service and my performance versus my weeks off of service and my performance, not only in the gym, but also with endurance sports. And I think part of it is due to sleep. So my weeks on service, I looked back last year and it's about 6.5 hours of sleep I get a night. Whereas my weeks off of service, I get closer to like 7 to 8 hours of sleep if I allow myself to sleep in a little bit. But on average, about 7.5 to 8 during my weeks off of service. And so, yeah, there's a direct correlation, but not only in terms of performance, but also injury. So, like, I start having a lot more niggles and like little aches and pains here and there during my weeks on service. Part of it is sleep, but then also is just the stress of being a physician and, having emergencies throughout the day, and like your cortisol levels are so sky high, and just the ability to recover from that. And so, the science behind it is so interesting. And so you have a few different aspects of it, right? So during my weeks on service, lack of sleep, huge factor into decreasing performance. Increased cortisol and stress, another huge factor to decrease performance and recovery. And then the other aspect of it is your caloric demand. So one would think that my calories would be much higher during my weeks off of service because I'm training so much more, but it's actually the opposite. So the amount of caloric burn that I have during my weeks on service relative to how much I'm exercising is much higher than when my weeks off of service. And a lot of that is due to daily steps, but then also just the amount of stress that I'm under in my body and my mind working so much. And so I used this doubly labeled water to see how many calories I'm burning during my weeks on service versus my weeks off of service with the same exercise load. And I was burning about 500 more per week, or I think it was maybe even 700 more per week during my weeks on service, which is about 100 calories a day, which is so interesting given the same amount of training volume.
And then how do you manage that caloric intake, especially like on shift and all that? Do you like meal prep early on? Because you do have a busy schedule. How do you manage to get in all the calories to be able to train and be able to focus at the workforce?
Yeah, I eat a lot all the time. And so during the training for the world's strongest Ironman, I was consuming about 6,500 calories a day. And it's of all different types of food. So for me, breakfast is like absolutely huge. And so my breakfast on a given day might be 1,200, 1,300 calories. And then during all of my activity, I'm constantly fueling just because I have to be prepared for the next whatever type of sport I'll be doing or what exercise I'll be doing. So I consume about 300 calories per hour during training. And so in the morning, say I have a 2.5 hour workout, during that workout, I've consumed, 750 calories. And then right after that, I consume like a 1,200 calorie breakfast. So before I even walk out the door, I've already consumed 2,000 calories.
Yeah. And how do you have like a special diet, or do you go, you obviously don't go low carb, but do you prioritize certain foods over others, high protein? What is your kind of, if you
All
have
the
a
carbs.
philosophy? Yeah, because I know it's all the carbs. How many grams of carbs do you usually take on per hour when you are training?
So it depends on like how hard of a
Yeah.
workout it is and the workouts leading up to it. But let's just say like on average, a long 6 hour bike ride, I consume about 400 calories an hour, all of carbohydrates, so about 100 grams of carbs per hour.
Yeah, that's what I try to tell all my athletes. Carbs are fuel. You know, you need calories are king. If you don't feel your workouts, especially when you're training for an event such like an Ironman, you're not going to have the energy to be able to perform at your peak performance.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd say like in the triathlon space, I'm kind of probably a little bit bigger of an athlete as well. When I raced Ironman Arizona, where I did the second strongest Ironman, I weighed I think 187 the morning of the race.
So what are you currently training for? I know we talked a little bit about it prior to starting recording, but can you tell the audience what you're currently training for?
Yeah, so I have a big race schedule this year, as long as I get it all approved by the boss. So it would be the next race that I have is a Buffalo Marathon. It is coming up in 9 weeks, and I would love to go like under 250 for it. That would be ideal, mainly because I want to make sure to get a Boston qualifying time. So last year I ran a 258. And unfortunately, the cutoff, even though it was like the time was 3 hours, you had to get like a 255 to get in. So I figure if I do below a 250, that'll give me enough buffer to make sure I get into Boston. And then after that, all this is tentative. I get my work schedule in 2 weeks, but Ironman Pennsylvania 70.3, which is in June. I would love to do the Last Man Standing in Maine, which is an ultra marathon. And for that, the goal would be just to get like at least 100 miles. And again, that one will be a big ask from the boss. So we'll have to make sure that she's on board and get some other buddies to do that with me. And then later in the year, I have a marathon in Kansas, Salina Marathon, which I'm doing with some buddies. And then I want to do Ironman Chattanooga. And then I have the 70.3 World Champs in December, which is in New Zealand.
Nice.
What do you prefer training for? A marathon, like a running race, a marathon, or last man standing, or triathlons?
Ooh, if I could take the swim out of it, I
We all
would say I would say triathlon. But
Yeah.
since I cannot take the swim out of it, I would say running. Well, my all-time favorite is lifting weights. Like I could lift weights all day, every day, and be so fulfilled. But to like push my limits, I do enjoy endurance sports too. And so if I had to pick, I'd say running and cycling. But so probably. Yeah, probably that, and then triathlon because of swimming would be last.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is I shouldn't be so negative about swimming. I need to find a love for it so I could be a better swimmer. But it's hard for me to enjoy it.
You gotta join a swim team or swim club or something like that. But I know with your schedule, that's probably not very possible. But I've always found that swimming with others makes it a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah, I think it would. And I think it just like swimming just does not, it's so technical, and so to get good at it, you have to spend a lot of time on form and, don't get me wrong, form is important in cycling and running too, but like I could push harder on the bike and go faster. I can, push a little harder running and go faster. I push harder going swimming and I look like a fish out on the sand just flopping around.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds about right.
Yeah.
So when you're getting close to a race or during the course of this year, because you've got a pretty long like schedule of races from like in a couple weeks, then all the way to December, are you like periodizing that strength training? Like, are you bringing volume down on strength training leading into a race, or do you kind of just keep it consistent and just like everything is status quo, or are you cycling that through?
Yeah,
And
that's a really
actually,
great.
before you answer that, if you could also touch on how you change your strength training. So if you go from high reps to low reps, because I know often people ask me, what type of strength training should I do with endurance training? And then, if you want to tie that into your schedule as well.
Yeah, for sure. So first, I would just say, like, in terms of like my overarching schedule, and I'm not saying that this is what people should do. This is just what I do. I don't swim unless I have a race on the schedule, and so which is not good. But so I will probably pick swimming back up my next maybe 12 weeks before my 70.3 or 8 weeks before my 70.3, which again is not ideal. And then in terms of cycling and running, If I have my marathon's first on the schedule, and so right now I'm doing a little bit of cycling just because I have races, coming up in the year, but it's only a couple hours per week right now, maybe 4 or 5 hours of light cycling per week, and I'm running about 60 to 70 miles per week. And so depending on what race I have coming up, depends on the volume. So like say once I get past Buffalo Marathon, then my next race is a 70.3. And so my cycling volume will start to increase quite a bit, and my running volume will dip down probably to 30 to 40 miles per week. And then my swimming volume will start to creep up. And so I'd say it's like running and cycling go up and down depending on how close my Ironman is, and then or if I have a running race in between that. In swimming, I truthfully just do it enough to swim about the same time that I always swim and make sure not to exert too much energy and destroy the glycogen for the rest of the race. And so I know that for the half distance, I'll be between like a 30 to 35 minute swim, and for a full distance I'll be between like a 105 and 115. And I know that's kind of what it stays at, and I think for my goals that's been just fine. And then in terms of lifting, I since I don't necessarily have any strength goals ahead, I'll get back to my type of lifting that I enjoy. And again, this is not saying this is what people should do, but I enjoy really high reps. To me, it just sends me into a place in my mind, into this like pain cave where I could just like enjoy the suffering of these high reps and as much weight as I could do, to a point to where I don't push myself too far to where I can't recover, but to where I'm just like hitting that sweet spot. Now in terms of like for performance for triathlon, I would say that you should have a little bit of both. So you should definitely strength train with lower reps, but the way I would supplement it is have like one day that you're primarily focusing on strength and then another day that your reps are a little bit higher. But I'd also have a little different exercise as well. Whereas like I lift like a bodybuilder style of lifting because that's what I enjoy, but that's not going to make you the best triathlete. But I do that because I enjoy that. Like when I cross the finish line, I want to have the biggest biceps that cross the finish line, right? Like, but if you're a marathoner, that really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Funny story. So actually, when Tommy and I first met, it was at St. George 70.3 World Championships, right?
That's
And
right.
I remember I was having kind of a bad day, and I'm just running, and up comes I see this guy, running, and this guy he literally looks like he just won Mr. Olympia or something, He's coming running past me, and sure as heck, it's Tommy Martin, he coming run past me, and we started chatting. I remember that made my race a day so much better. Just seeing you on that course, and I remember we had the same socks. Remember we had the same, so we both wore Outweigh.
Yeah.
Outweigh socks. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like in the worst mood for that race because like I had like high hopes to do pretty well, but I ended up having a flat on the course because someone had threw tacks at the bottom of a hill, and I had two tacks in my tire, and it took forever to get my tire changed. Like I couldn't do it. One of the service guys couldn't do it. They had to call another service guy to come change my tire. Well, anyway, so then when we got to the run, I was pretty fresh, I will say, because I was sitting on the side of the road for 45 minutes getting my tire changed. Well, and then I see Parker. He had, his decked out tri kit and all that his last name on the back of it. I'm like, no way, that's Parker. And I know he should be running faster than this right now. So I ran up to him like, Parker, let's go. Like, I'm not letting you run slower than me because you are so much faster than me. And then we really talked for probably the next 80 minutes or 70 minutes, however long we ended up running together, and truly turned my day around, that I got to run with you for, most of that half marathon, even though you were having a day where you were suffering quite a bit too.
Yeah. No, that was a fun time.
Yeah, it was a blast. And we've been able to stay in touch since, which has been really awesome to see. Now you've broken. You're like somewhere in the 8 hour mark for an Ironman now?
So my personal record is 8:47 at Ironman Florida. I'm hoping to go under 8.5 hours at Ironman Texas. This upcoming in a couple of weeks here, actually 4 weeks out. But something that you've actually also helped me with while we've been connected since then is kind of social media. Because I know along with, along with being a doctor, husband, father, triathlete, marathoner, you're also huge on social media, and you produce some of more content than anyone I know. And I produce content as well, and I know how much time it takes me, and I can only imagine how you are able to produce so many reels, shorts, with already such a jam-packed schedule. And so maybe if you kind of want to talk about how you got into social media, because how many followers do you have right now?
So depending on the
Across the
platform,
platform, yeah.
across all platforms, so TikTok is somewhere around 2.3 million. Facebook, so I was at over 300,000, and then my Facebook account got hacked and deleted. And so I had to restart it 3 weeks ago, but in 3 weeks I've grown it to almost 200,000 now, which I'm really pumped about. And then Instagram is somewhere around 150,000. And then there's some like other smaller platforms as well, like Clapper, Eliminate, that have like 10,000 or so. But so, you know, so across all platforms, oh, and then YouTube is close to 70,000, I think. So across all platforms, almost 3 million, I think. But it all started when I think in 2013, I was meeting with tons of medical students, and my wife was like, Tommy, this is just like impossible. You cannot meet with 20 students a day, still do well in medicine, pass your exams. Like you need to find a more efficient way to do this. Why don't you start social media? So I started YouTube and Instagram back in 2013, and I made a deal with God. Like if it helps one person, I'll never stop making content. And so from 2013 to 2019, I was posting a lot, like 3 times a day, every single day on every platform, and had almost no growth. So I think between 2013 and 2019, I had grown like 10,000 across all platforms. And then I saw a video by Gary Vaynerchuk, who pretty much, he's a big entrepreneur, and he was pretty much said, if you're not on TikTok, you're wasting your time. And so I studied the app for 2 weeks, saw what videos did well, what videos didn't do well, made my first video, and overnight I had 50,000 followers, and that video hit 1 million views. And
What was
then
that video?
it was just like a trending video, an introduction video where I introduced myself, and it went nuts. And then within a year, I had over 1 million, and then within 2 years, I had over 2 million, and it just continually grew and has continued to grow.
So how do you find the time to, I mean, when do you record do you record them when you're not working, or how do you, the time and also the ideas? Because to create so much content, you always have to be coming up with new and thinking of something new to create.
Yeah, so I'll say there's like different types of creators, right? And so some creators are so set, like my content needs to be perfect. It needs to be filmed with a good camera. It needs to have incredible audio. And they may only post once a week. Whereas for me, I don't really agree with that. I feel like if you have a camera, so my first video I ever made was on an iPad mini first generation, where I recorded it and edited it all on that and uploaded it to YouTube. So like my first piece of advice is whatever you have, start with that and start making content. The other thing is like I film my life. So I've already recorded a clip of us talking right now that's going to go into one of my videos, like while we've been here podcasting, right? And so I film everything. And I think any piece can, like any content or any part of your life can be content. And so for example, during one of my races, my wife recorded me just running by her. In the back of my tri-suit, I was wearing a black tri-suit. It was covered white. And so most people would be like, oh, well, that's a crappy video. Like he looks terrible, and he's got crap all over his tri-suit. Well, to me, I was like, you know what? This could be an educational video about why am I covered in white, which is salt, right? And so I made like a 15-second video with text overlay of that, and that hit like 5 million views.
Cool.
Yeah. And so like anything you record, like all you have to do is have your phone and turn it on and start recording stuff. And that can be a piece of content. Triathlon stuff is so easy. I had a video hit 2 million views of me putting Ziploc bags on my feet before I put on my socks, because it's going to keep my feet warm, right? And that hit a couple million views. And so like I feel like there are so many aspects of our life that can be content. You just have to find a way to make it engaging, interesting, and keep people to watch it to the end.
So how do you manage fatigue and like prevent burnout while juggling like your medical responsibilities, triathlon training, and then your social media pages?
Yeah, I'd say I have a different view of burnout than most people. And I do not get burnt out. And I think part of that is because I think people get burnt out when they're doing things that do not light their heart on fire and make them like so excited to wake up in the morning. Like I love training. I love being a doctor. I love helping people. I love making content. And so like to me, like those things give me so much energy, give me so much life, give me so much excitement. Like I cannot get burnt out. If anything, people around me get burnt out because I'm doing all this stuff and they're like, Tommy, just chill out. Like just stop for a minute, right? But to me, like all of those things give me energy. But once, like, so example, or let me finish my thought. Whenever any of those things stop giving you passion, excitement, and joy, you should stop doing it. Right. And so, like, for example, swimming, if I swam every day, I would get so burnt out with triathlon, I would never race again. Right. Because I do not like swimming. But because I enjoy racing, whenever I know a race is coming up and I want to perform, I do some swimming to make sure I still perform, but I don't do so much of it where I'm so sick and tired of triathlon because I'm doing this thing that I absolutely hate doing every single day, right? And so I would say like follow your passions, and once they stop being your passions, stop doing them and do something else. And I think that's like really how I, manage burnout. The other thing I'd say is basic things: get enough sleep, eat a healthy diet, do other things that de-stress you. So like spending time with my wife, going to church, doing these things that continue to help my overall mental health and continue to keep me energized.
Speak what you just mentioned, I brought up a question I was going to ask. How do you because especially with your wife and kids and family, because I have noticed on social media, you're sometimes, like you mentioned, you're recording your wife, you're recording stuff you do with family, with others. Do you ever run into conflict? Because I know personally, if I'm filming or recording, sometimes people can get a little tired of me always filming or recording something. Have you ever ran into that with, especially with your wife, because you're recording so much of your actual life? Have you ever come across that, like any conflict or any ways to deal with people not necessarily not wanting to be in your recording, but some people just don't want to be filmed all the time.
Right. Yeah, I would say that, especially because I'm so much a workaholic, it was
Yeah.
a big wake up call when, so I'll try to make this short, but I never thought I was a selfish person. Like I always wanted to help people. I'd always, fundraise for different things and do all of these things to help people around me. And I didn't think I was selfish until I got married. And then I realized just how selfish I was because like everything I wanted to do was still to satisfy me. Even if I was helping other people, that makes me feel good inside. So it was still selfish. And I was sacrificing time away from my wife. And then, after I was like setting boundaries, I was like, you know what? I have improved on this so much. I'm not very selfish. And then I had a child. And it's like, oh my gosh, I am still like the most selfish human in the world. And so like it just continually refines you. And I would say that my wife has been so instrumental in helping me stay grounded and helping me set good boundaries that help our family more than anything. Because I would work from the time I wake till the time I sleep if I didn't have someone on the outside saying, Tommy, look, this just is too much. And so we've done a really good job to where I work and do the things that, fill me up personally during times where either they're at work or at school or sleeping, and I'm not taking away time from my family because my family also fulfills me and energizes me, and I don't need any other outlet to do that. And so when I get home from work, I might film Oliver because it's like a cute thing he's doing, but like outside of that, I'm not working whenever I'm home, and I'm not working when it's Oliver and I or when it's Phoebe, Oliver, and I. And if I do start to fall back into that, because it's very easy to do, my wife and I have talked like, call me out on it. Like, say, Tommy, like, why are you on your phone right now? Like, is there something you need to go do and get this done so that we could just spend undivided attention? And so I would say, especially people who are very type A and are very workaholic, they need other people on the outside that hold them accountable and help them set boundaries.
I think that's a great point, and it definitely sounds like you've got excellent like time management skills, which is so critical, I'm sure, for not only your job, but trying to succeed in endurance sports specifically.
Well, Thank you. I will say, it's always a struggle, and it's something you could also constantly refine. I also do a lot of multitasking. So if I have a 3-hour bike ride in the morning, I'm editing videos, while I'm on my bike. Or even like if I have an easy run, I'll run on the treadmill so I can still work. And I'm not saying people should do this. This is just how I'm able to produce a lot of content and do these things. Is I'll edit videos or put together videos while I'm running on the treadmill, at an easy, comfortable pace. Now it's probably hurting my form and maybe I'm not getting the most benefit from that run, but I'm still able to do a lot of things that I enjoy.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, finding that balance where you're getting you're training, but you're also doing stuff that you enjoy. So it sounds like, yeah, you're doing a great job with that. But
Yeah, and like to the listeners, and again, like, getting burned out is so common. And I think like once you approach like, am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating enough calories to not be fatigued? And then just soul searching and like, why am I truly doing these activities? Like, am I doing them because they make me happy? Or am I doing them because I think the world around me thinks I need to be doing these activities? And if it's the latter, if you're not doing it because that you enjoy it and it fulfills you, then it's probably time to, pursue something else. And the other thing I would say is like, it's okay to be selfish, to do these things, but in doing these things, you become a much better person for everyone around you because you're like literally igniting your heart on fire, which is going to make you so happy that the people around you are going to be so infected by your joy and your excitement and your passion that it's okay to be selfish, to allow yourself to be the best person you could be.
Yeah, so I was just gonna like, what's your like why? So why did you want to become like a doctor? Why do you want to do these endurance events? I know it's like you said find enjoyment, but do you have a greater why for both like triathlon training, marathon training, and just being a doctor in general? Like, what was your big why? And I'm also like really interested just like your why for being a doctor because I think that's such an interesting like career path.
Yeah, that's some really, really good questions and some deep questions, and I'll try not to be too long-winded. So I'll start with the being a doctor part. And so I would say, so in high school, I thought I was going to be a teacher and a coach, and I was pretty dead set on being a football coach, being a math teacher, and having the summers off, coaching, enjoying life. When I was younger, when I was about 12, probably 14, 13, 14, I'm not sure. I worked with children with autism, and I acted like as their best friend, as like a older sibling, and things like that. Well, one of these times I had this woman came up to me. I didn't know this woman. She randomly walked up to me and said, Tommy, I need to talk to you about something. I said, sure, what's going on? And she said, do you have a cell phone? And I did. It was like old. I think it might have been a Razor or something. And she said, I want you to record what I'm about to tell you. And I said, okay. And she said, I believe that it's God's plans for you to become a physician and that you're going to heal many people in Jesus's name. And I thought this lady was nuts. I was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to be a teacher and a coach, but whatever you think. And so I went through high school, and I had that recording on an old laptop and went through high school. My senior year, I went on a mission trip. And on this mission trip, there was a pastor there that was like just talking about God's plans for us and what he has an individual plan for each of us. And I went up to the altar afterwards and he prayed over me and he said, I as he was praying, he said, and it's God's plans for you to become a physician and you're going to heal many people in Jesus' name. I'm like, no, I'm going to be a teacher. And he was just like, just keep an open mind. I'm like, okay, whatever. And so I went back home, and at that time, my uncle bought me a new laptop. And so my old laptop, I converted everything over to my new laptop. And when I went through that, I saw an audio file. I'm like, what in the world is this? And I clicked on that audio file, and it was that woman's voice from like 4 years ago, saying that it was God's plans for me to become a physician and that I'm going to heal people in Jesus' name. And from that day forward, I was like, I think I'm supposed to be a physician. And after that, I went to college and majored in biomedical chemistry. And from that day forward, I was dead set that I believed it was God's plans for me to become a doctor. And reflecting back on that, I think that it was the perfect calling for me. I think I wanted to be a teacher and a coach because for me, it would have been easy. It would have been, I was extremely good at math. I was good at football. I had really good instincts. Like I wouldn't have to work that hard, I didn't think, to do those things. So I was really good at all of that. But become a doctor, I was never the smartest. I was never the most talented in school. Like I think it would have been extremely challenging for me to become a physician. And I think that that was scary to me. And I now believe that that's what God had in planned for me, and it lines up with everything. And I could go a lot deeper into this, but I think that God had a plan even from me at 14 years old working with children with autism, as now I'm a parent to a child with autism who I had learned from a young age how to care for them and how to love them and how to serve them, to where now my own son has autism and I'm able to care for him. Like I don't think that was a coincidence. I don't think that that was just, random. I think God had a plan for all of that. And so my why for being a doctor, I think, is rooted in my faith. And I know that we all have different faiths, and but for me, my Christian faith is definitely what brings that why about. And now on a daily basis, I have to remember that why, but then there's also things throughout my daily life that help me with that. So I could talk about this forever, and I don't want to take up too much time. But my whys now revolve around patient encounters, where like I had this woman who was going to have a procedure. We had to tell her that we thought it was cancer. The chief surgeon went in, told her that, and left, and she was distraught. I stayed back and prayed with her. And then months later, I get called to an office, and it ended up being that lady. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, it's you, the angel that God had sent me." And so, like, all of these moments just is like reminding me why I'm doing this. And it's, because my love for patients, for my want to care for them. And so that was my why for medicine. And my why in sport, I think, if I'm truthful, it was rooted in being overweight as a kid, and the desire to overcome that, and the desire to be good at sports, and then the desire to see what my body was capable of, when at one point in my life I didn't think it was capable or worth anything, because I was always made fun of for being overweight. I was always made fun of for being fat, and I didn't think I could ever be good at anything. And so I think it was that drive to overcome those disbeliefs. So long answer, but kind of my whys for the two.
Great, great.
Great
That's
answer.
that's incredible.
Definitely. Wow. I was just gonna say, it's like, to build off that question. So you do see, as a doctor, you do see a lot of like freak incidents, like crazy scenarios, and then that you like of people like really down bad. Like whenever you're in like during like an Ironman race, like you see people that like on a day-to-day basis that came like ever like will ever like be able to do an Ironman. Like, so does that ever like motivate you while you're in like a hard spot or like a dark place during an Ironman or like a endurance event like that? Does that ever like bring you like motivation, seeing other people suffering or lack of ability to ever even do an Ironman?
That's a really great question. And I wish I could say yes, but probably not. I do think that being a physician and seeing people in those scenarios make me live every single day to the fullest, and know that every single second of every single day is infinitely valuable, because in 1 second, we may not have another breath. And so, like, we need to treat every single second of every single day as if it's our last. And not only with that, but the way we interact with every single person every single day, we need to treat that as it's holding an eternal weight and an eternal purpose, and that we have like an impact on every person that we come in contact with. And that's permanent, like that's forever. And we get to decide what that impact is. And so I think by being a physician and just seeing how precious life is and how it could be gone in a second makes me live every single day to that, or to the fullest. But given your question, I think my son having an extremely rare genetic disorder, and I don't know if he'll ever be able to ride a bike. I don't know if he'll ever actually be able to run. I don't know what he will be capable of in the future. That gives me so much drive that I want to, accomplish things that I never thought I could accomplish, to show him that regardless of his diagnosis, that it does not define his potential, and that he's capable of achieving anything and everything he sets his mind to.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. I know we're getting close to an hour here, and as we have said quite a few times, Tommy has quite the schedule, so we don't want to take up too much of your time. But one more thing before you go, Tommy, on this podcast, we usually do a workout of the week segment or a gel nutrition product of the week. And so what those are is, if you want to either talk about a new carb or gel that you recently had that you really like, or it doesn't even have to be new, just something that you enjoy taking, or you can also talk about a workout that you've done this past week that you really enjoyed and that you want to share with our listeners. So you can do the gel of the week, the workout of the week, or both, if you have something to touch on.
Awesome, sure. I'll just do both really quickly. Disclaimer, I work with Power Bar, but I love their hydrogels just because they are.
What flavor? What's your favorite flavor?
So I honestly like them all. So there's like orange and mojito. I love caffeine, so the mojito is nice because it has some caffeine in it. But I like them just because they're so smooth going down. It's like you're drinking like a little bit thicker Gatorade, which is just really, really nice. So I the hydrogel is super great. The only thing I don't like is they're a little bigger, and so they can, like, if you're carrying 10 of them, it's quite a bit to carry. But they're incredible. Workout of the week, I will say a workout that I love doing, which I think comes from my background of running a marathon with a 40-pound vest, is my easy runs throughout my marathon training or with a weighted vest. So like today I did 7 miles with a weighted vest at like a 7 minute per mile pace. And my heart rate stayed like in the 140s. And so my thought process is like, as I'm losing weight for this marathon to perform well, if I run at the same weight as my starting weight, so right now I'm 10 pounds down, so my weighted vest was 10 pounds. And so if I run at what my base weight was, but I'm actually lighter than that, come race day, my performance should be considerably more because I'm used to running the same paces, 10 pounds heavier. There's some research behind it. Now there's a fine line between if that weight is hindering you in terms of your gait and, like your cadence and where your foot strikes and things like that. So you have to be very careful. But for me, I was this weight 7 weeks ago, right? And so to me, it's not much different. It's just now it's 10 pounds heavier, but it's really not changing my gait or anything. And so all of my easy runs right now are with a weighted vest. And then my speed work day, my tempo days, I take the weighted vest off and feel like Goku or Gohan.
Well, there we go.
Any Dragon Ball Z fans?
Well, there we go. Big thanks to Mr. or Dr. Tommy Martin for joining us on today's podcast episode of the Tryhards. If you guys have any other questions for him, you probably have already heard of him as he has over, if you're one of the 3 million followers of Tommy, then, but yeah, go check out his social media. I'll have all that listed in the description box of whatever platform you're listening on. And I think that's gonna do it. So thanks, Tommy, and we'll catch you guys back here next week for another episode of the Tryhards. Sweet. I will end recording.
Awesome.